My name is Danielle Mercer. I was 35 years old, a widowed mother, and the person responsible for keeping my 6-year-old daughter, Lily, safe. The night my parents and sister came pounding on my front door, I stood between that door and Lily, with one hand raised behind me, silently telling her not to come any closer. The first impact shook the frame. The second made Lily grab the back of my shirt. My doorbell alert kept pulsing across my phone. On the small screen, my father, Thomas, stood closest to the camera. My mother, Carol, was beside him. My younger sister, Brooke, moved in and out of view behind them. All three of them were shouting, "Danielle, open this door. We need to talk to you. You're making everything worse." My father entered the code he had used for years. The keypad flashed red. He tried again. Red. The code had not failed. I had disabled it. Lily's fingers tightened in my shirt. She had been home from the hospital for only a short time, and sudden noises still made her body go rigid. I could feel her trembling behind me. "They can't come in, can they?" she whispered. I turned just enough for her to see my face. "No," I said, "they can't come in." Until that week, those were the people I had trusted whenever I needed help with my daughter. Then my parents left Lily locked inside their SUV during a heat wave. Not for a few minutes. Not for the half hour they later wanted everyone to believe. They left my 6-year-old alone for 3 hours and 17 minutes. By the time someone found her, she was barely responsive. Her body had become dangerously overheated, and the doctors told me she had come frighteningly close to dying. My parents wanted me to call it an accident. Brooke wanted me to stop asking questions. In a written message, she said, "We had such a great time without her, without Lily, without the child who was trapped outside while the adults she trusted enjoyed themselves somewhere else." I read that sentence once, then I read it again, because part of me still believed I had to be misunderstanding my own family. I wasn't. I didn't cry. I took action. Exactly 3 hours later, my parents and Brooke were at my house, pounding on the door as if being related to me gave them the right to force their way back into my life. My father struck the wood again. "Open the door, Danielle." I kept my eyes on the screen and moved Lily farther down the hallway. I did not argue through the door. I did not tell them what I had learned or explain why their access code no longer worked. They already knew I had done something they could not quietly undo. What they did not know was whether I would hold the boundary once they were standing outside together, demanding that I choose them over my daughter again. And there was another question I could not stop asking. How had two people I once considered dependable grandparents left a 6-year-old in a locked vehicle long enough for her body to begin shutting down? Before I tell you what I did and what brought all three of them to my door, subscribe to the channel, turn on the notification bell, and like this video. This community is for people who understand that the most dangerous warning signs are often dismissed because they come from someone we love. Your support helps more viewers recognize those signs before silence gives harmful choices room to grow. To explain why I refuse to open that door, I need to take you back to the morning the heat wave began changing everything. My phone woke me before sunrise with 2 alerts. The first was an excessive heat warning for Briar Glen and the surrounding county. The forecast showed 3 days of dangerous temperatures, with the afternoon expected to reach 102 degrees. The second alert came from Lily's summer day camp. Its air conditioning system had failed overnight. The building could not safely receive children, so the camp was closing for the day. I read the message twice, then looked at Lily asleep across the hall. On most mornings, a sudden closure would have meant calling my supervisor, working from home, or using a personal day. That morning, none of those options existed. I worked as a continuity coordinator for the Briar Glen Office of Emergency Management. While other parents were being told to keep their children indoors, my team was opening public cooling sites, coordinating transportation for elderly residents, and making sure emergency phone lines remained staffed. The city needed me at the operations center. Lily needed a safe adult at home. I called Nadia Ortiz first. She lived next door, had known Lily for years, and was one of the few people I trusted without needing to explain every detail. But Nadia was already committed to work and could not leave. That left my parents. My mother answered on the fourth ring. "Danielle, is everything all right?" Lily's camp just closed. Their air conditioning failed. "In this heat?" "Yes. I have to report to the emergency operations center." "Can you and Dad come here and stay with her?" There was a brief pause. I heard my father ask something in the background. "Of course," my mother said. "We'll be there soon." "I need her kept inside today. The warning starts this morning, and it's supposed to get worse by noon." "We understand." No errands, no park, no taking her anywhere. My mother gave a small sigh, the kind that usually meant she thought I was over-explaining. "Danielle, we raised 2 children. We know what heat is." I almost apologized. That had become a reflex in my family. If I made a request specific enough to sound like a boundary, I softened it before anyone could accuse me of being controlling. But the warning banner was still glowing red across my phone. "I know," I said. "I just need you to promise me she stays here." "She'll stay there," my mother replied. "Go get ready." Thomas and Carol arrived 18 minutes later. My father let them in with the code I had given them after my husband died, when I began relying on them as emergency contacts. Lily came out of her room in her pajamas and went straight to my mother. She did not hesitate. That mattered because Lily was careful about adults. She trusted my parents because they had picked her up from school, stayed with her when I worked late, and returned her to me safely enough times that I had stopped considering their presence a risk. My father looked at the printed notes I had left on the kitchen counter. "Lunch, water, emergency numbers," he said. "You planned for a siege. The heat index may become dangerous before noon. Then we'll enjoy the air conditioning." I checked the thermostat, filled Lily's water bottle, and set out the art supplies she liked. I reminded my parents that her lunch was already prepared and that I could be reached through the operations center if the cellular network became overloaded. My mother touched my arm. "We have her," she said. "Go take care of the city." Lily followed me to the front door. "Are Grandma and Grandpa staying here all day?" she asked. I looked at my parents. "Yes," my father said. "We're not going anywhere." My mother nodded. "You're staying right here with us, where it's cool." I kissed Lily, told her I would call, and walked outside. When I closed the front door behind me, I believed my daughter was safe inside with 2 people who had just promised me they would not take her anywhere. The Emergency Operations Center occupied the ground floor of a municipal building that looked ordinary until something went wrong. That morning, every wall monitor displayed the same red heat map. Cooling centers were opening at libraries and community halls. Transit supervisors were rerouting buses toward them. Calls were already coming from people whose apartment air conditioning had failed. I took my place at the coordination desk and began doing the work I knew how to do. I confirmed that each site had water, backup power, and staff. I checked transportation lists for residents who could not travel alone. I reviewed the threshold for requesting additional ambulances if heat-related calls began rising. At work, caution was never treated as an insult. If I asked whether a generator had been tested, no one accused me of distrusting the technician. If I required 2 contact methods, no one said I was tearing the department apart. We prepared for failure because pretending people were incapable of failure was not a safety plan. At home, I had never applied that rule to my parents. Shortly after I arrived, I sent my mother a message asking how Lily was doing. She replied that everything was fine. Usually, she included a photograph, Lily painting at the kitchen table, eating fruit, or making a serious face over a puzzle. That message contained no photograph, but the cooling center phone rang before I could think about it. For the next hour, I moved between calls, maps, and resource requests. My parents had earned enough trust to make my decision reasonable. After my husband, Aaron, died unexpectedly 3 years earlier, they became the people who came when ordinary life stopped working. They picked Lily up from school when a meeting ran late. They kept her for occasional weekends. They knew her pediatrician, her food allergies, and which nightlight she wanted beside the bed. They had not been perfect. My father sometimes returned her later than promised because he considered schedules negotiable. My mother gave her sweets after I asked her not to. Once, they took her on an errand without telling me, then laughed when I said I needed to know where my child was. Each violation was small enough to explain away. That was the arrangement our family had practiced for years. My younger sister, Brooke, had a need. My parents rearranged everything around it. If I objected, I became the difficult daughter. I had learned to preserve peace by distinguishing between what hurt and what was worth a fight. Brooke's engagement had made the pattern more visible. My parents spoke about every tasting, fitting, and photograph as though the entire family had been assigned a role. I listened, helped when I could, and tried not to measure how much attention they gave her against how often they asked about my life. But none of that had ever made me believe they would abandon Lily in physical danger. Before noon, the outdoor temperature reached the level predicted for much later in the day. We extended hours at 2 cooling sites and sent additional bottled water to another. I checked my phone again. No missed call, no photograph. I messaged my father this time. "How is Lily? Please have her call me when you get a chance." The message showed as delivered. He did not answer. I told myself they were doing an art project. I told myself my mother had put her phone down. I told myself that people who had cared for Lily safely dozens of times did not become dangerous because they were slow to send a message. Nadia could not relieve them. She was at work herself, helping families prepare for the same closure that had affected Lily's camp. I considered asking my supervisor to let me drive home, but an assisted living facility had just reported a cooling system failure, and our team was coordinating the transfer of residents. I stayed at my desk. That decision became one of the places my guilt tried to live afterward. For months, I replayed the moment and imagined standing up, leaving the building and reaching my house before anything happened. But I had not left Lily with a stranger. I had left her at home with her grandparents after receiving a direct promise. At the time, staying at work was not neglect. It was trust. My phone rang just after the assisted living transfer was confirmed. The number was unfamiliar, but local. "Danielle Mercer?" a woman asked. "Yes. I'm calling from Briar Glen Regional Hospital. Are you Lily Mercer's mother?" Every sound in the operations center seemed to move farther away. "What happened?" "Your daughter was brought into the emergency department after being found unresponsive in a parked vehicle." I stood so quickly that my chair rolled into the workstation behind me. "That's not possible. She's at my house." The woman repeated Lily's full name and date of birth. Then she said the words, "Stonebrook Estate." I knew the name only because Brooke had mentioned it in connection with her engagement. I did not understand why Lily was there. I did not know whose vehicle she had been in, how long she had been inside, or who had found her. I knew only that my daughter had been taken somewhere I had expressly forbidden, and the first person to tell me was calling from an emergency department. My supervisor saw my face and came toward me. I handed him the headset because I could no longer process both the voice and the room. He listened long enough to get the entrance and hospital unit, then told another coordinator to drive me. I do not remember crossing the operations floor. I remember the elevator taking too long. I remember trying to call my mother and getting no answer. By the time we reached the hospital, I had called both parents 6 times. Neither had told me what they had done. A nurse met me before I reached the emergency department desk. "Mrs. Mercer? Where is my daughter?" She guided me through 2 secured doors while explaining that the team was actively cooling Lily and supporting her circulation. The words were clear individually. Together, they made no sense. The child on the bed looked too still to be mine. Lily's damp hair had been pushed away from her face. Cooling pads surrounded her body. Lines ran from both arms, and monitors displayed numbers I could not interpret quickly enough. Her skin was flushed in some places and strangely pale in others. Several people moved around her with the focused speed of professionals who did not have time to reassure me. I stopped at the edge of the treatment area. "Can I touch her?" The nurse asked me to wait while the physician completed an assessment. Standing there without touching Lily was the hardest instruction I had ever followed. The emergency physician came to me a few minutes later. Lily's core temperature on arrival had been 105.1 degrees. She was severely dehydrated, her awareness was altered, and blood tests showed that her kidneys were under acute stress. "Is she going to live?" I asked. "She is responding to cooling and fluids. We need to monitor her closely." "That isn't what I asked." The physician did not offer certainty he did not have. "She is critically ill. If the exposure had continued longer, it could have been fatal." I gripped the metal rail at the end of the bed. My mind did what it always did in a crisis. It looked for tasks. I gave the nurse Lily's medical history. I confirmed her medications, allergies, and pediatrician. I signed the forms placed in front of me. I asked which laboratory values would show whether the kidney stress was resolving and when they would repeat them. Tasks gave my hands somewhere to go, while fear moved through the rest of me. My parents appeared near the treatment room entrance after Lily's temperature had begun coming down. My father's shirt was damp at the collar. My mother had been crying. They looked frightened, and for one brief second, I wanted one of them to tell me there had been a misunderstanding. "How long was she in the car?" I asked. My mother answered first. "Maybe 30 minutes. My father immediately said, "It couldn't have been much more than that." "Why was she in a car at all?" "We went to see Brooke," he said. Lily was sleeping. I left the engine running and the air on. "You left her alone?" I checked on her. "How many times?" "Twice." My mother looked at him, then back at me. "We thought she was safe. We were right inside." The phrase "right inside" meant nothing beside Lily's bed. "You promised she would stay at my house." "Brooke needed us for something," my mother said. "It was supposed to be quick." I looked from her to my father. "Which one of you found Lily?" Neither answered immediately. My father finally said that a venue employee had noticed her. That was the first fact that did not fit their explanation. If my father had checked twice, why had a stranger discovered the emergency? Before I could press further, a nurse asked them to leave the treatment area. Lily was being transferred to the pediatric intensive care unit. Brooke called while the transport team prepared her. I almost declined the call. Then I answered because I still did not understand why any of them had gone to Stonebrook. "Danielle, I'm so sorry," she began. "Did you know Lily was in the vehicle?" "I thought she was with someone from the venue." "Who?" "I don't know. One of the staff, maybe." "What was the person's name?" I said I don't know. Mom and Dad were handling her. My parents had just told me they left Lily in the SUV. Brooke was telling me she believed Lily was with an unnamed employee. Their accounts could not both be true. Why were my parents at Stonebrook? "We were having the menu tasting. 2 people couldn't come, so I asked Mom and Dad to fill the places. I didn't know any of this was going to happen. You knew they were supposed to be caring for Lily." "I knew she was with them." That answer was carefully smaller than the question. I ended the call when the transport team began moving Lily. A hospital social worker met me outside the pediatric intensive care unit. She explained that the circumstances required a report of suspected child endangerment and that law enforcement would need statements from everyone involved. My mother overheard enough to approach me. "Do we really need police involved tonight?" I stared at her. "Lily is in intensive care." "I know, I'm only saying your father and I are already devastated." The social worker stepped between us and asked my parents to wait in a separate area. That first night, Lily remained minimally responsive. Her temperature normalized, but the doctors continued watching her kidney function and neurological status. I sat beside her with one hand resting near hers, careful not to disturb the lines. My parents had told me 30 minutes. The doctor had told me that further delay could have killed her. I did not yet know which part of the family's story was false. I knew only that reassurance was no longer enough. Detective Rosa Kim arrived the following morning. She did not enter with dramatic promises or tell me that she already knew what had happened. She introduced herself, asked about Lily's condition, and explained that she would speak with each adult separately. "I need your account of the morning," she said. "Start before your parents arrived." I told her about the camp closure, the excessive heat warning, and my work assignment. I showed her the messages confirming that my parents would care for Lily at my home. I showed her the instruction that there would be no errands and no outings. "Did you give either of them permission to take Lily to Stonebrook Estate?" "No." "Did you know they planned to go?" "No." Kim recorded the answer without changing expression. "Your parents estimate she was alone for about 30 minutes. Your father says he checked twice. We will try to verify both statements independently. Do you believe them? My job is to establish what the evidence supports." It was not a comforting answer, but it was the first honest one I had received since reaching the hospital. Later that morning, my parents were allowed to see me in a family consultation room away from Lily. My father stood rather than sit. "This has gotten out of control," he said. "Lily's in intensive care. I know where she is. I'm talking about the way everyone is treating us like criminals. You left a 6-year-old in a vehicle during an excessive heat warning, with the engine running." He repeated that fact as if it ended the conversation. "I believed the air conditioning was on," he continued. "My intention was to keep her comfortable while she slept." My mother reached for my hand. I moved mine into my lap. "We made a terrible mistake," she said, "but it was a mistake. Please don't let strangers turn it into something that destroys this family." The old pressure was already taking shape. My father emphasized what he meant to do. My mother emphasized what my response might cost. Lily's injured body disappeared from both arguments. "I'm not deciding what the evidence says," I told them. "You can tell the detective we would never hurt her," my mother said. "I can tell her what I know." My father's face hardened. "That sounds like a threat." "It's not a threat, it's the truth." I returned to Lily before they could turn the consultation room into another trial of my loyalty. She became more alert later that day. Her eyes opened for longer periods, although she tired quickly and sometimes seemed confused about where she was. When she recognized me, her fingers moved weakly against the sheet. I leaned close. "I'm here." Her lips were dry. The first thing she asked was whether I was angry. "At you?" "Never." I stayed like Grandpa said. The sentence nearly broke the control I had maintained. "You did nothing wrong." Lily remembered being told that her grandparents would return quickly. She remembered waking because the air had stopped moving. She remembered her water feeling warm, the metal and plastic at the buckle becoming hot against her fingers, and the rear door refusing to open. "I pushed it," she whispered. "I pushed really hard." "I know. The window didn't work. That was not your fault." She did not know how long she had been alone. Heat, fear, and fading awareness had broken the experience into sensations rather than time. I did not ask her to force those pieces into an adult chronology. "Grandma said to be good," Lily murmured. "You were good. Then why didn't they come back?" I could not give her an answer that made sense. "They were responsible for coming back," I said. "You were never responsible for rescuing yourself from something adults did." She closed her eyes while I held the edge of her hand. That conversation gave me emotional truth. It did not establish the duration. Detective Kim was careful about the difference. The medical findings made a brief exposure harder to accept, but medical evidence alone could not tell us exactly when the vehicle had been locked or whether anyone had returned. Kim requested the venue's entrance records, parking footage, and emergency call data. Nadia came to the hospital that afternoon with clean clothes, my phone charger, and the mail she had collected from my porch. She did not ask me to decide what should happen to my parents. She asked what Lily needed and what I needed for the next 12 hours. I told her I needed the truth. She sat beside me while I called Detective Kim for an update. Stonebrook Estate had confirmed that its entrance camera recorded license plates and that the lower parking deck was covered by security cameras. The venue had agreed to preserve the footage. For the first time since the hospital called, The answer no longer depended on which family member spoke most confidently. Detective Kim returned the next morning with a laptop and a printed timeline. She asked whether I wanted Nadia to stay. I said yes. Then she waited until Lily was asleep and closed the door to the hospital room before she opened the first video. The entrance camera showed my father's SUV turning onto the Stonebrook property at 11:38 a.m. The image was clear enough to read the license plate. My father was driving. My mother sat beside him. In the rear seat, behind the dark glass, I could make out the outline of Lily's booster harness and the bright edge of her yellow shirt. The lower deck camera picked them up seconds later. My father parked in a space that was partly shaded at that hour. Both front doors opened. My parents got out. My mother looked back once while my father adjusted his jacket. At 11:44, he pressed the key fob. The SUV's lights flashed. They walked toward the stairs. Lily remained inside. I watched the recording past the point where they disappeared. The image did not change. A strip of sunlight crept across the pavement. Other cars arrived and left. No one returned to my father's SUV. He said he checked on her twice, I said. Kim did not soften the answer. The camera covers the only pedestrian route between the venue and this level. Neither grandparent returned to the vehicle before the rescue. The SUV's manufacturer records and my father's own statement resolved what had happened to the air conditioning. He had left the engine running when he went inside, apparently believing that made his decision safe. The vehicle's idle protection system automatically shut the engine off after 30 minutes. At approximately 12:14 p.m., the air conditioning stopped. The parking space never had full shade. As the sun moved, the light reached more of the SUV. The water bottle in Lily's cup holder held only what I had packed that morning. It was not enough to protect a 6-year-old trapped in a sealed vehicle on a 102-degree day. My father had activated the rear child locks and window controls months earlier and routinely kept them on. Lily was secured in a 5-point harness. Under ordinary conditions, she could sometimes work the chest clip down with both hands, but she had never been able to release the lower buckle. As the vehicle heated and her coordination failed, even the movements she knew became impossible. Nothing about that evidence made Lily responsible for getting out. It showed how thoroughly the adults had controlled every exit before walking away. At 3:01 p.m., a Stonebrook maintenance worker named Mateo crossed the lower deck on his scheduled route. The footage showed him passing the SUV, stopping and stepping backward. He approached the rear window, cupped his hands around his face, and looked inside. Then he began striking the glass. He tried the doors, pulled out his phone, and ran toward the wall cabinet where the venue kept emergency equipment. The dispatch record showed his call at 3:04. Other staff arrived while he was still speaking to the dispatcher. They broke a rear side window and reached Lily before the ambulance entered the property. Kim placed one finger on the printed timeline. From 11:44, when my father locked the doors, until 3:01, when Mateo found her, Lily had been alone for exactly 3 hours and 17 minutes, not 30 minutes, not a sequence of short intervals interrupted by checks. 3 hours and 17 minutes. The footage established where my parents had been. Other evidence began to establish why. Stonebrook provided the schedule for Brooks tasting. My parents were expected to participate in a menu review and venue walkthrough that began before noon and continued into the afternoon. Their movements appeared on cameras near the entrance and terrace. They did not look like two people making repeated trips to a child. They looked like guests attending an event. Brooks' public posts supplied timestamps of their own. At 12:26, she uploaded a photograph of herself between my parents on the terrace. At 1:18, another image showed the three of them raising glasses over plated samples. A short video posted at 2:09 caught my father laughing while a coordinator described the ceremony layout. Kim had already preserved those posts, along with the original metadata, before anyone could change them. Brooke had told the social worker that she had no idea Lily was at Stonebrook until the ambulance came. Text messages contradicted her. My mother had written to her that morning that camp was closed and they were stuck babysitting. Brooke answered that the tasting package had already been paid for and asked them to come anyway. My mother said Lily was not allowed at an adult-only event. Brooke replied that Lily could wait in the car with the air on because the tasting would be quick. At 12:41, my mother sent, "She's still out there. Your father says the car is running." Brooke answered, "Please don't interrupt this now. We're almost done with the important part." They were not almost done. They remained inside for more than 2 additional hours. The messages did not show that Brooke understood Lily's exact medical danger before the rescue. They showed something narrower and still devastating. Brooke knew a 6-year-old had been left in the SUV and discouraged my parents from interrupting her event to go to her. Nadia sat beside me without speaking while Kim moved through the records. I had known my family favored Brooke. I had not known they would convert that preference into a locked door around my child. My parents' phones contained gaps. Several messages from the tasting period had been deleted. The gaps did not erase the copies recovered from Brooke's device or the screenshots Nadia had made before Brooke began editing her account. Nadia had followed Brooke online because our families had attended holidays together. On the evening of the rescue, while I sat beside Lily's bed, Nadia noticed Brooke removing photographs from her engagement page. She captured the posts and timestamps before they vanished. Then she saw a message Brooke had placed in a family group chat and deleted minutes later. Nadia read it aloud only after Kim asked her to confirm the wording. "We had such a great time without her. Mom and Dad lost track of time. Stop trying to make this uglier than it was." There was no misunderstanding hidden in that sentence. Brooke described Lily's absence as part of what made the afternoon enjoyable. She admitted my parents had lost track of time. Then she demanded that I make the facts smaller so the family could live with them. Kim asked Nadia to forward the original screenshot and preserve the device. Nadia did both. I did not call Brooke. I did not post the message or send it to relatives. I gave the evidence to the investigator whose job was to determine what could be proved. Lily spent 4 days in the hospital. Her kidney function moved back toward normal with fluids and monitoring. Her temperature stabilized. She began speaking in full sentences, then asking for familiar food, then complaining that the hospital blanket scratched her legs. On the morning of discharge, the physician told me there was no sign of permanent organ damage. Physically, Lily was expected to recover fully. Relief came, but it did not erase what had happened. Lily startled when a transport aide brought a wheelchair. She asked whether the van downstairs would be hot. When a nurse reached toward the belt, Lily pulled both hands to her chest and cried until I promised no one would fasten anything without telling her first. The hospital arranged follow-up tests and referred us to a child trauma therapist. The social worker reviewed the safety plan twice. Detective Kim told me the investigation would continue after we went home. My parents left voicemails while Lily was hospitalized. My mother cried. My father insisted that the automatic shutoff had been unpredictable. Both said they loved Lily. Neither changed the length of time she had been alone. Neither explained why they had promised to keep her home, driven her to an adult-only event, and locked her where no one inside could see her. For 4 days, I had focused on whether Lily would live and whether her kidneys would recover. When the discharge papers were placed in my hands, the next responsibility became unavoidable. Loving my parents had not protected my daughter. Evidence, enforceable boundaries, and controlled access might. Before I took Lily home, I decided that was what I would build. The first morning after Lily came home, I created a folder instead of a family argument. I placed the discharge summary inside it with my messages from the morning of the tasting, the hospital contact log, Brooke's full group chat message, and the screenshots Nadia had preserved. I wrote dates and sources on every page I had printed. Where I did not know something, I left it blank. Then I called Detective Kim. I gave her the records electronically and arranged to provide the originals. I also made a supplemental statement. In it, I rejected the account my parents had asked me to repeat. The visit to Stonebrook had not been an emergency. Lily had not been checked every 30 minutes. An unnamed venue employee had not been responsible for her, and I had never authorized the outing. My statement did not claim I knew every conversation that occurred inside the venue. It stated what I had personally said, what the records showed, and what my parents' version had concealed. After that, I began removing access. I notified Lily's school in writing that Thomas and Carol Mercer were no longer approved for pickup, emergency contact, or release of information. I removed them from her pediatric and hospital authorizations. I told the camp director that no change involving Lily could be accepted from anyone but me or a person I later named in writing. I deactivated the front door code my parents had used for years. Through the victim services contact Kim provided, I submitted a request for temporary protective conditions while the investigation continued. I asked that all communication come through formal channels and that my parents and Brooke have no direct contact with Lily. I did not ask the police to punish them for being my family. I asked the system to recognize that the people who had placed Lily in danger were also the people most likely to demand private access while the facts were still being established. Kim interviewed my parents again that day and arranged a separate interview with Brooke. By 10:17 that morning, my father had been informed that I had supplied a supplemental statement and requested protective conditions. The time appeared later in the investigator's contact record. Exactly 3 hours later, at 1:17 p.m., the doorbell camera notified me that all three of them were on my porch. Lily was in the back bedroom with Nadia, working on a puzzle her therapist had suggested as a quiet activity. I closed the hallway door before I went to the front of the house. She did not see who had arrived. My father pressed the bell again. My mother knocked with both hands. Brooke stood behind them holding her phone. I did not open the door. "Danielle, we know you're in there," my father called. The new camera recorded the porch and saved the sound. I kept my phone in my hand and spoke through the closed door. "You need to leave." My mother said they had come to correct what I had told the detective. She wanted me to say the day had become confused and that no one had intended for Lily to remain alone so long. My father demanded that I withdraw the statement about the 30-minute checks. According to him, the camera could have missed him because he had used a different staircase. Kim had already confirmed there was no alternate pedestrian route to that parking level. Brooke said the screenshots were private and taken out of context. She wanted me to tell Kim that her message had been an emotional reaction, not evidence. Then she said my refusal would ruin her wedding. Their words were different from what they had said in the hospital, but the purpose was the same. They wanted the record to bend until their choices looked accidental and their consequences looked like something I had inflicted. "You need to leave my property," I repeated. "Do not contact Lily." My mother struck the door with the flat of her hand. "You cannot keep our granddaughter from us over one mistake." The pounding began after that. Not an attempt to break through, not a physical assault, but a loud, relentless demand that the closed door surrender because they were family. From the bedroom, Lily called my name. Nadia answered before I could. "Your mom is right here and you are safe with me." I called the non-emergency police line, explained that people involved in an active child endangerment investigation had been told to leave and were refusing, and gave the dispatcher my address. When my father heard me make the call through the door, he said I was humiliating them. I looked at the lock he could no longer open. "You have been asked to leave," I said. "The police are coming." Brooke walked toward the driveway first. My parents remained on the porch until 2 officers arrived. I showed one officer the investigator's contact information and the request I had filed. The officer did not decide the underlying case at my doorstep. He told my parents they had no right to remain after being directed off the property and instructed all 3 of them to leave. My mother cried as she walked to the car. My father pointed at the house and said I would regret treating family this way. Brooke recorded part of their departure, then lowered her phone when an officer spoke to her. No one was arrested that afternoon. No one needed to be dragged away. Under the officer's direction, they got into their vehicles and left. I saved the complete doorbell recording, noted the time, and sent a copy to Kim. Only after the street was empty did I go to Lily. She was sitting on the floor beside Nadia with the puzzle unfinished. "Was that Grandma?" she asked. I sat at her level. Yes, she was outside and I did not let her in. "Can they take me?" "No." I showed her the simple parts she could verify. The hallway door was closed. Nadia was with her. The front door was locked, and the people outside had gone. "Adults do not get to come inside just because they are angry," I said. "I decide who has access to you, and I am keeping you safe." For years, that door had represented welcome. My parents had possessed a code because I believed families should not have to wait outside. That afternoon, the same door became a boundary they could not overrule. When Lily finally returned to her puzzle, the house was quiet. It was not the brittle quiet that followed my family's old arguments, when everyone waited for me to apologize and reopen what they had crossed. It was the quiet of an enforced limit holding. The preserved parking footage, the hospital findings, and the doorbell recording supported temporary no-contact conditions while the case moved forward. The order did not decide every charge or settle every disputed fact. It established one immediate rule. My parents and Brooke could not approach Lily or use other people to reach her. Paper did not end the pressure. It changed how I handled it. Relatives called from numbers I recognized and numbers I did not. Some said my parents had made a terrible mistake but had already suffered enough. Others told me that keeping grandparents away from a child was cruel. A cousin asked how Aaron would feel if he knew I was destroying the only family Lily had left. No one had the right to recruit my dead husband into an argument he could not answer. Aaron had checked Lily's car seat twice before every trip. He had walked back into restaurants to retrieve a cup rather than leave her alone for 1 minute. I could not know every choice he would have made, but I knew his love was not a reason to surrender her safety. I stopped debating. I gave people one sentence. Contact concerning Lily must follow the protective conditions. If they continued, I ended the call and recorded the attempt. Lily's recovery did not follow the clean upward line I wanted for her. She could laugh at breakfast and panic beside a parked car 20 minutes later. She began waking before dawn to ask whether every door was locked. She refused to sit in the rear seat unless I opened both doors first. On hot days, the click of a buckle could send her hands searching for the release before we had left the driveway. Her therapist explained that a 6-year-old might not describe trauma as a continuous memory. It could appear as a body alarm, a repeated question, or a need to control the next step. We did not force Lily to recount the SUV. We helped her identify what she felt in the present and what she could safely do. At home, she practiced naming fear without being corrected. "The car feels too hot. I want the door open. I need you where I can see you." My job was not to persuade her that the danger had never happened. It was to respond predictably now. Before each drive, I cooled the vehicle and invited her to touch the seat. I showed her the water bottle in the holder. I told her where we were going and who would leave the car. When we arrived, every person got out together. If I needed to return a cart or speak to someone, Lily came with me. Her therapist helped us build an age-appropriate vehicle plan. Lily learned that she could shout, press the horn if she could reach it, look for an adult in a uniform, and use simple words, "I am locked in," call for help. Those were emergency tools, not a transfer of responsibility. The first rule remained that an adult must never leave her alone in a vehicle. We practiced the chest clip and buckle only when she asked. Some days she touched them and stopped. Some days she released the practice buckle 3 times in a row and grinned. I praised the skill without telling her it was what should have saved her. Sleep took longer to repair. For weeks, she moved into my bed before morning. Later, we placed a small card beside her lamp showing the people permitted to care for her. My face came first. Nadia's came second. Her teacher and the school office were listed beneath us. The care list outside the house became just as specific. Lily's school received photographs of the two adults allowed to collect her. Staff had to verify identification instead of accepting familiarity. Medical offices received the same written names. No relative could add a visitor, change an appointment, or receive information through a remembered family detail. I named Nadia as Lily's approved emergency contact. She completed the school's verification process and agreed to the role after we discussed exactly what it required. I issued her a new individual door code that logged when it was used. It was not the old family code passed from one person to another. It belonged to one verified adult and could be canceled without changing every lock. None of those measures were dramatic alone. Together, they replaced assumption with a system. There were good days. Lily returned to school. She drew pictures that had nothing to do with cars or hospitals. She began sleeping through the night more often. Her follow-up tests stayed normal. There were hard days, too. A heat alert on my phone made her cry. A classmate's grandmother waiting at pickup made her hide behind her teacher. Once, she asked whether Grandma and Grandpa loved her. I did not tell her they did not. I also did not use love to explain away what they had done. They may feel love, I said. They still made choices that were not safe. Adults are responsible for both their feelings and their choices. She thought about that, then asked whether Nadia could pick her up the next Friday. Yes, I said. She is on the list. The answer was ordinary. That was why it mattered. The case took months. That waiting had no clean rhythm. Long, quiet stretches ended with a request that made us revisit the same afternoon in exact detail. There was no single meeting where everyone confessed and the truth became easy. Detectives compared statements against footage, phone extractions, vehicle data, medical records, and dispatch times. Prosecutors reviewed what each person had done and what could be proved under the law. Lawyers requested records, hearings moved, dates changed. I continued working, taking Lily to therapy and answering formal questions when asked. I did not build a public campaign. I did not call my parents' employers, contact Brooks' vendors, or try to make strangers punish them. The evidence had a proper destination, and I kept sending it there. The charges against my parents were built around their own conduct, taking Lily after promising they would not, restraining her in the SUV, walking away, and failing to return for 3 hours and 17 minutes. Their false accounts mattered because cameras and records showed that the supposed checks had never occurred. Eventually, Thomas and Carol accepted negotiated pleas to child endangerment charges. The agreement meant Lily would not have to testify at a trial. Before I supported that resolution, I asked the victim advocate to explain what it would and would not accomplish. It would not make my parents understand. It would not return the afternoon they had taken from Lily or remove the fear that remained in her body. It would produce enforceable consequences without requiring a 6-year-old to carry the prosecution in a courtroom. That was enough reason for me. The court imposed supervised probation, mandated child safety and heat risk education, and ordered restitution for the portions of Lily's medical care and therapy that insurance did not cover. No contact conditions remained enforceable. Any future request to change them would have to proceed through the court, not through a doorstep, a holiday invitation, or a relative's phone. My mother submitted a written apology through counsel. She said she was sorry that Lily had been hurt and that the family had been torn apart. Then most of the letter described what she had lost: mornings with her granddaughter, photographs from school, holidays at my house, and the right to call herself an involved grandmother. She asked me to recognize how painful the separation was for her and suggested supervised visits as proof that I had not stopped loving my parents. I read it once. An apology that treated access to Lily as the cure for Carol's pain was still centered on Carol. It did not acknowledge the promise she had broken, the hours she had stayed inside, or the pressure she had brought to my door. I gave the letter to my attorney and did not answer it privately. My father expressed less regret. At sentencing, he said he would comply with every condition, but he continued to describe the engine shutoff, as the true cause of the emergency. He spoke as if an automated feature had carried Lily to Stonebrook, fastened her into the harness, and prevented him from checking on her. Compliance was required. Insight was not something the court could order into existence. Brooke remained aligned with them. She told relatives that I had weaponized a family accident because I had always resented her. She never acknowledged asking my parents to attend or telling them not to interrupt the tasting. Her wedding plans continued without us. The investigation did not produce a criminal outcome for Brooke. Knowing Lily was in the SUV and discouraging an interruption was morally devastating, but it was not the same evidentiary case as the conduct of the two adults who had custody, controlled the vehicle, and left her locked inside. I did not invent a charge because the legal result felt incomplete. Estrangement was a consequence I could control. Brooke lost direct access to Lily and to me. When relatives attempted to relay her messages, I ended the exchange. When packages arrived without an approved sender, I documented and returned them through the proper channel. I stopped waiting for a sentence from her that would make the earlier sentence disappear. We had such a great time without her. That message remained in the evidence file. It no longer needed to remain open in my mind every day. After the court process ended, I moved the case documents from the kitchen cabinet to a locked storage box. I retained them because the orders had durations, review dates, and enforcement procedures. I did not keep them within reach as a shrine to what my family had done. The restitution payments went directly toward uncovered medical bills and Lily's ongoing therapy. They did not purchase forgiveness. Probation did not restore trust. Completion of a safety class did not entitle anyone to a relationship with the child whose safety they had ignored. There was no reconciliation. For a long time, I had believed endings required people to meet again and say the one true thing that explained everything. Our ending was administrative and quiet. Verified names on lists, an active order, a therapist we trusted, a code assigned to one safe person, and a child who no longer had to enter a room with adults simply because they were related to her. Lily kept growing while the adults who harmed her lived with the boundaries their choices had created. I learned to let that be the consequence instead of waiting for remorse to become protection. The following summer, the first excessive heat alert arrived before breakfast. My phone sounded on the kitchen counter. The tone was the same one I used at work, and Lily recognized it before I reached the screen. She stopped stirring her cereal. "Is it going to be like that day?" she asked. The question no longer made me search for a way to erase the memory. Her therapist had taught us that safety began with truthful, manageable information. "It will be very hot today," I said. "That day happened, and I know your body remembers it. Today we have a plan, and I will be with you." She looked toward the driveway, where my car sat under the morning sun. "I feel scared about the buckle." "Thank you for telling me." I opened the freezer and placed another cooling pack beside the one already there. We were scheduled to meet Nadia at the community library before the afternoon heat peaked. We did not have to go, but Lily wanted to attend the summer art program. On the counter stood the new insulated bottle she had chosen herself. It was blue, with silver stars and her name printed on a removable label. I filled it with cold water while she added 3 ice cubes, counting each one. The bottle was a comfort, not a safety device. Water could not make a locked vehicle safe. A child's knowledge could not make abandonment survivable. The plan depended first on what the adult did. Before we left, I started the car and cooled the interior while Lily remained inside the house with me. Then we walked out together. I opened both rear doors and let her place her palm on the seat. "Cool enough?" I asked. She nodded. I fastened the harness slowly, naming each step because she preferred to know when the clicks were coming. The chest clip sat at the right level. The lower buckle locked. "What can you do if something ever feels wrong?" I asked. "Yell. Press the horn if I can. Tell a safe grown-up I'm locked in and they should call for help." "And whose job is it to make sure you are never left here?" "The adults. Always." She touched the buckle, then rested her hands beside the bottle. We drove to the library with the air conditioning running. When we parked, I got out and immediately opened her door. We entered together. At no point did I ask her to wait while I completed one quick task. The plan was not complicated because safety did not require cleverness. It required consistency. The program lasted an hour. Lily painted a row of houses beneath a purple sky while Nadia helped another table clean brushes. When the heat alert on a staff member's phone sounded, Lily looked at me. She took one breath, then another. "It's the warning," she said. "Yes. Warnings help people do the plan." "That's right." She returned to her painting. By early afternoon, we were home with the curtains drawn and the thermostat holding the rooms cool. Lily spread her picture across the kitchen table. Nadia had gone to collect lunch and was returning to spend the hottest part of the day with us. The keypad sounded at the front door. Lily lifted her head, but she did not freeze. "Is that Nadia's code?" I checked the access notice on my phone. The entry showed Nadia's name, her individual code, and the current time. "Yes, she's on the list." Nadia opened the door with a paper bag balanced against her hip and called out before stepping into the hallway. She had followed every part of the system, even though she was my closest friend and Lily's verified emergency contact. Trust did not exempt her from the rule. Her willingness to follow it was part of why I trusted her. Lily ran toward her, carrying the painting. "We have cold noodles," Nadia announced, holding up the bag. "And I remembered the fruit you like. Look at my houses first." They sat together at the table while I locked the deadbolt. The air conditioner moved quietly through the house. Lily's insulated bottle stood within her reach, still cold enough for beads of water to collect along its sides. On the first day of the previous heat warning, I had viewed an open door and a shared code as proof of family closeness. I had mistaken unrestricted access for love. Now access was named, verified, and limited. It could be given to a person who respected Lily's safety and withdrawn from anyone who treated that safety as negotiable. The boundary did not make our home less loving. It made love accountable for what it allowed through the door. Lily laughed when Nadia guessed that one of the painted houses was a purple castle. She corrected her, explaining that every house in the picture had strong walls, cold water, and windows that opened. I stood in the entry for one more moment, listening to them plan where the people in the houses would sleep. Then I closed the front door behind the people I had chosen, with my daughter safe inside.